Hello everybody and welcome to Filthy Casuals EDH. This is PDX Gamer coming to you today with a deck tech for Selvala, Heart of the Wilds. Now, Selvala is a wonderful commander. I've been having a lot of discussions lately with folks about what is the best mono green commander. Most people tend to say Omnath, Locus of Mana. I disagree. Omnath's a great card, but if you've never played with Selvala Heart of the Wilds, I would encourage you to take a look at her. Selvala Heart of the Wilds is printed in Conspiracy Take the Ground, fairly new card, and I just think a lot of people haven't seen her yet. But give her a try. I think you're going to like it. So let's take a look at it a little bit closer. Selvala Heart of the Wilds is 1 and 2 green for a 2/3 legendary creature Elf Scout. Now that 2/3 does come into play here in just a moment, and you'll see why as we get into the card. Now let's take a look at her abilities. Her first ability, whenever another creature enters the battlefield, its controller may draw a card if its power is greater than each other creature's power. She has built-in card draw right on the card in mono green. That's pretty great. Now this is a global effect, so your opponents could potentially take advantage of this as well. However, we're going to build the deck so that it is highly unlikely that anyone other than us will be able to take advantage of this on a regular basis. So we're going to be able to use this to get us some good card advantage. Now the next thing she does is she ramps us. For a green and tap, add X mana in any combination of colors to your mana pool where X is the greatest power among creatures you control. Built-in ramp, and can be potentially be big time ramp right here on the card. Now her being a 2/3 is very important because basically the turn after she comes in, she can already ramp you by a mana. She can tap for 2 mana herself. So by investing in green and tapping her, you're already producing 1 extra. So that's great. Early game ramp built right into your commander. A very, very cheap casting cost at 3 converted mana cost makes for a really good commander. So let's dive into the deck and take a look at some of the things we're going to be doing. Now our main strategy, ramp, ramp, ramp. We are going to be ramping like crazy, generating a ton of mana. We're going to use that mana to play some great big creatures. We're also going to be casting some great big X spells, some of which are creatures themselves. And the end result will be that we will try to overwhelm our opponents with our huge creatures and our card draw that we have built into our commander. So let's start off by taking a look at our creatures. And I'm going to breeze through the creatures fairly quickly, and we'll get into them a little bit more in a little bit more depth as we talk about some of the specifics of the deck. And we're going to start off on the low end of the curve. Okay, 1-drop Elvenwald Tracker. Let's use our creatures for removal. Sacker Tribe Elder for 1 and a green. Let's just go and get a basic forest, put it on the battlefield. Yavimaya Elder for 1 and 2 green. Let's just go and get a couple of basic lands to put in our hand, and potentially let's just draw a card as well. Eternal Witness at 1 and 2 green, and as the battlefield, let's just recur a card from our graveyard to our hand. Reclamation Sage at 2 and a green destroys an artifact or an enchantment. For 2 and a green, Mana Gorger Hydra starts off with a 1/1 trampler, but every time a player casts a spell, you put a +1/+1 counter on it, so it gets big very quickly. Pelucranos World Eater, 2 and 2 green for a 5/5 legendary creature Hydra with Monstrous X for XX in green. So a big creature, it helps us in generating big mana and can be used as a board wipe. We'll talk about more of that later. Silklash Spider for 3 and 2 green, 2/7 reach Spider helps us to defend against flyers, which we're kind of weak against. Also can help us to take out flyers as well. Colonian Hydra at 3 and 2 green is a trampler, enters the battlefield with 4+1/+1 counters on it, and every time it attacks, it doubles the number of counters on every single creature that you have. Garruk's Pack Leader for 4 and a green draws his card. Thunderfoot Baloth and Pathbreaker Abax are both in here as for their overrun effect. A Green Warden Morass is here to help us to recur cards. We get to potentially get 2 cards from our graveyard back to our hand. Conduit of Ruin, the 6-drop spot for 6 colorless. 5/5 Eldrazi that lets you search up your library for a colorless creature card with command cost 7 or greater. Reveal it, put it into your hand, put it onto your library on top of it. And then also ramps us by 2 on our first creature every turn. Hydra Brewmaster, 7/7 Hydra with Monstrous X that lets us put a whole bunch of Hydras onto the battlefield when we monstrous it. At the 7-drop slots, we have Siege Behemoth. Gives everybody Uber Trample. Whenever it's attacking, any creature that you're attacking with can deal its damage directly to the player if you so choose, as if it were not blocked. Terracodon comes in and destroys up to 3 target non-creature permanents and gives them some relevance instead. Woodfall Primus comes in and gives us destroying 1 non-creature permanent. Has Persist, so it'll come back and do it again. Artisan of Kozilek gives us a big body with some recursion and Annihilator 2. Ulamog, the Senseless Hunger, when we cast it, we can exile a couple of permanents, and it also mills people into for 20 cards every time it attacks, and it mills it into exile instead of the graveyard, as well as being indestructible. For 10, we have Kozilek, Great Distortion, that draws us cards if we have less than 7 in our hand. We can also discard cards to counter spells. World Spire Worms, 8 and 3 green for a 15/15 trampler, and when it dies, you put 3 5/5 green worms onto the battlefield. And instead of it going to the graveyard, it shuffles back into your library. It That Betrays, a 12-drop Eldrazi with Annihilator 2, and whenever an opponent sacrifices a non-token permanent, you get to put that card back onto the battlefield under your control. And then we have Emrakul, the Promised End, 13-drop for 13/13 legendary creature Eldrazi. It can cost less depending on what you have in your graveyard. It has flying, trample, protection from instants, and it allows you to Mindslaver an opponent when you cast it. Okay, let's move on and take a look at our big X creature spells that we have, starting with Mistcutter Hydra. Now, all of these come in with X +1/+1 counters on them, and they're 0/0s to start off with. Mistcutter Hydra is X and a green, can't be countered, has protection from blue and haste. Protean Hydra, if damage will be dealt to it, you remove that many counters from it instead, and then at the next end step, you put 2 counters back on it for every 1 you removed. Ivy Elemental for X and a green is just a very basic, comes in with X counters on it. Vastwood Hydra is X and 2 green, and when it dies, you can redistribute the counters amongst any number of creatures you control. Primordial Hydra, at the beginning of your upkeep, you double the number of counters on it. It's X and 2 green, and if it has 10 or more, it has trample. Genesis Hydra, X and 2 green. Whenever you cast it, you get to look at the top X cards of your library and put a permanent, non-land permanent with converted mana cost X or less directly onto the battlefield. Hooded Hydra can be played as a morph and turn face up with 5 counters, or X and 2 green for X counters. And when it dies, you put a 1/1 green snake creature token onto the battlefield for each +1/+1 counter. So it gives us a little bit of wrath insurance. Lifeblood Hydra is very similar, X and 3 green. This time, though, when it dies, you gain life and draw cards equal to its power. And then we have Hangerback Walker. For XX, you get a 0/0 that comes in with X counters on it. And when it dies, you put a 1/1 Thopter, colorless Thopter with flying on the battlefield for each counter on it. And you can pay 1 and tap it to add a counter on it as well. Okay, let's move on and take a look at our sorceries. And the first couple here are going to be sorceries that actually create creatures. First is Worm Calling, and it's a huge star of this deck. Love this card. For X and a green, you get a sorcery where you put an XX green worm creature token into play, and has buyback for 2 and a green. We can go infinite with our mana in this deck, so with this card, we can put an infinite number of infinitely large worms directly onto the battlefield and constantly buy back the Worm Calling back to our hand. Gelatinous Genesis, you don't get to return the card to your hand, but it has, for XX and green, you put XX green creature ooze tokens onto the battlefield. So again, if you have infinite mana, you can put an infinite number of infinitely large ooze tokens. Genesis Wave for X and 3 green. Let's just look at the top X cards to put any number of non-land permanents with converted mana cost X or less onto the battlefield, and the rest into our graveyard. We'll talk a minute about how we can use this to put our entire deck onto the battlefield. Animus Awakening, we can do the same thing but with lands, and if we have Spell Mastery, then we get to untap those lands. More traditional sorceries, we have Kadama's Reach. Ramses gets us a basic land on the battlefield and 1 into our hand. Natural Order lets us sacrifice a green creature to go search our library for any green creature and put it directly on the battlefield. Bramble Crush for 2 and 2 green destroys any non-creature permanent. Primal Command is a modal spell at 3 and 2 green that lets us either gain some life, puts a non-creature permanent on top of its owner's library, can shuffle a graveyard into a library, or lets us tutor up a creature to our hand, whichever we want. And yeah, great card, great modal card. You get to choose any 2 of those. We also have Tooth and Nail for 5 and 2 green. Lets us search our library for any 2 creatures to put them into our hand, or put any 2 creatures from our hand onto the battlefield, or we could pay 2 extra to Entwine to do both. So for 9 mana total, search your library for any 2 creature cards, put them directly onto the battlefield for 9 mana. Pretty awesome. Okay, next we have Nissa's Revelation for 5 and 2 green. Scry 5, reveal the top card. If it's a library, draw cards equal to its power, gain life equal to its toughness. Gonna just get us with our deck. We're gonna get a ton of cards, and we're gonna gain a lot of life. Praetor's Council is great recursion, brings everything from your graveyard back to your hand, exiles the council, and then you have no maximum hand size. And then Concordant Crossroads gives every creature on the battlefield haste. So that's not just yours, everybody else's, so keep that in mind. We have one instant, and that's Crossing Grip. Great disruption card with split second. Lets you destroy target artifact or enchantment. And with a split second means it's definitely going to happen. Once you cast a card with split second, in case you've never done that, never heard of it, as long as that spell is on the stack, nobody else can activate abilities or cast any other spells until it resolves. So it basically can't be countered. Nothing else can be reacted to. Okay, we run 3 Planeswalkers in the deck. Nissa Vital Force ramps us by untapping a land, recurs cards to her hand, and also a very easy to get emblem. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you may draw a card. That's a -6, and it starts off with 5 loyalty. So you +1 at one time. The next turn, you can get that emblem. If you have Doubling Season on the battlefield, you can get it right away. Freylease, Land of War's Fury, does everything we want to do. It puts a mana dork on the battlefield, it destroys a target artifact or enchantment, or it draws us cards. Garruk Primal Hunter can either put a beast on the battlefield, draw cards equal to the greatest power among our creatures we control, or put a bunch of worms on the battlefield. Usually we're going to be using this to draw cards, but its other modes are good as well. And we also have a 4th Planeswalker, but it starts off as a creature. Nissa Vastwood Seer is the Magic Origins flip Planeswalker. Enters the battlefield, you get to search your library for a basic forest, put it into your hand, and when you play a land, if you have 7 or more, you get to flip her. And her flip side, we're basically going to be doing your +1 every time. You get to reveal the top card of your library. If it's a land card, it goes directly onto the battlefield. Otherwise, you put it in your hand. You can also create a token or untap up to 6 lands. They become 6/6 elemental creatures that are still lands. Usually, though, we're going to be using this for card advantage. Okay, let's take a look at our enchantments. Sylvan Library, classic green enchantment, lets you draw a couple extra cards and then choose which of those 3 you want to keep and put the other 2 back, or pay 4 life per card not replaced if you want to keep all of them in your hand. Elemental Bond lets us draw extra cards whenever a power 3 or greater creature enters the battlefield, which is going to be most of our creatures. Song of the Dryads, excellent disruption, turns anything into a forest with no other abilities. Doubling Season, everybody knows Doubling Season doubles the number of counters, doubles the number of Planeswalker loyalty counters that it comes into the battlefield with, doubles the number of tokens that are produced. Great card. Let's move on to our artifacts now. Soul Ring, because Soul Ring, everybody runs Soul Ring, ramps you by 2 for 1 mana investment. Emerald Medallion, green spells cost 1 less to cast. Most of our spells are green, so it's going to ramp almost every spell in our deck. Sword of the Animus lets us go and get a basic land to put on the battlefield tapped whenever we attack. Lightning Greaves and Swift Boots both give a creature haste and protect that creature. Usually that's going to be our commander. Extraplanar Lens doubles all of our forest, and actually will double everybody's forest. So keep that in mind. If you exile a basic forest, every basic forest on the battlefield will now tap for double mana. Okay, and then finally we have these 3 artifacts that we're going to use to untap and get multiple uses out of Selvala. 1,000-Year Elixir we can use once, and it also allows us to use her ability the turn she comes in. Sword of the Params and Umbral Mantle will also allow us to untap her for 3 generic mana. We can untap to reuse use her ability. Umbral Mantle also gives her +2/+2 until end of turn every time we use it. And Sword of the Parents can give either +2/+0 or +0/+2, depending on whether the creature that's attached to is tapped or untapped. Now, quick honorable mention, Staff of Domination is a card that I don't currently own. Or I should amend that. I own it, but it's in the mail. Haven't received it yet. As soon as it gets here, it will be going into the deck as well. It's just another way for us to untap Selvala and go infinite with producing the mana. So we're definitely going to be including it in the deck. Okay, let's take a look at our land base. The first 4 lands. So we're going to take a look at our lands that ramp us. We got Blighted Woodland and Myriad Landscape that both go and get 2 basic lands to put them onto the battlefield. Nykthos, Shrine to Nyx. We're going to have, a lot of our permanents are going to have multiple green pips on them, so we're going to be able to generate a whole lot of extra green mana with Nykthos. And then Temple of the False Gods, a pretty standard inclusion, gives you 2 generic mana, but you have to have at least 5 lands on the battlefield. And then we have some utility lands. Rogue's Passage makes a creature unblockable, which, considering we have huge creatures, potentially an infinite large creature, we can use this to make it unblockable. Reliquary Tower, no maximum hand size. Homer Path allows us to gain control of our creatures when people steal them. With large creatures, we may be the target of some stealing effects, some threat effects. Ghost Quarter lets us get rid of a troublesome land. And then High Market, same thing. If somebody tries to take one of our big creatures or take our commander, we can just tap, sacrifice it, gain a life, and then they don't get it, we get it back. And we run 28 basic forests. Pretty simple. So let's take a look at ways that we can maximize Selvala's ramp. Now, we talked about these three cards very briefly. 1,000-Year Elixir allows us to untap her one time. Sword of the Parents and Umbral Mantle, however, we're going to see here in a second how we can use these two to potentially get infinite mana. Let's see how we do that. First thing we're going to need is Selvala on the battlefield. Then we can use either Sword of the Parents or Umbral Mantle. These are interchangeable and either one will work. For this example, we're going to use Umbral Mantle. We also need a 5-power creature on the battlefield. Any 5-power creature will do. Now, as a note, if you are using Staff of Domination, which is, again, I don't have it in the deck yet, but it will be, you can do this with this as well, but you need a 6-power creature instead of a 5-power creature. You'll see why in just a moment. And then we're going to need one untapped forest. Start off with, we're going to have Umbral Mantle attached to Selvala, Heart of the Wilds. We'll also have our untapped forest and our 5-power creature. First, we'll tap our forest for a green mana. Use that green mana to activate Selvala's ability to generate 5 mana of any color because of Polukranos' 5 power. We're going to choose green since we're a green deck. Now, we're going to use 3 of that to use Umbral Mantle's ability to untap Selvala and give her +2/+2 until end of turn. That's going to leave us with 2 green mana in our mana pool. We're going to use one of those to activate Selvala again. And we're going to add 5 more green mana to our mana pool, bringing our total to 6. We can then repeat this process as many times as we like. Each cycle will add 1 mana of any color to our mana pool and gives Selvala +2/+2 until end of turn, making her infinitely large. So, what are we going to do with all this mana? Well, Animus Awakenings, if we can generate infinite mana, we can basically get every single land in our deck onto the battlefield all at once. Gelatinous Genesis allows us to put an infinite number of infinitely large ooze creatures onto the battlefield. Worm Calling does the same thing with worms. Genesis Wave, we can use this to put every card in our deck onto the battlefield all at once, as well as have all of our cards in our deck in our hand. Now, we can use this in conjunction with Green Warden and Marassa or something else that would return something from our graveyard. Because we're going to need to return Praetor's Council back to our hand. Once we dump all of our permanents onto the battlefield, everything else that's a non-permanent is going to go to the graveyard, and all of our X00 Hydras, they're going to go to the graveyard too. Praetor's Council will allow us to get those back. We'll use Green Warden and Marassa to get Praetor's Council back from our graveyard. Now, it's important to note that if we don't have Praetor's Council in our hand, if it goes to the graveyard, the creatures and permanents from Genesis Wave into the battlefield before the other cards go to the graveyard. So we cannot use it after it's in for its into the battlefield effect. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to use one of our Planeswalkers that recur things, or perhaps something like just anything like that we can do to recur it, or we can use our High Market to sacrifice Green Warden Marassa, exile it, and then return the Praetor's Council to our hand that way. Then we cast Praetor's Council, return everything back to our hand, and continue to use our infinite mana to play out all of our XX creatures that come in with counters on them, all of our Hydras. And we can dump every creature onto our battlefield and make them all infinitely large, or make the Hydras infinitely large. And since we run Concordant Crossroads, we'll be able to swing right away. Genesis Hydra does a mini version of this. We can basically cast X being our entire deck, go through and get any non-land permanent with converted mana cost X and put it onto our battlefield and put the rest back into our library. Hydra Brewmaster, if we have that, we can use its monstrous ability to create an infinite number of infinitely large Hydras. Silk Glass Spiders will be able to wipe the board of all flyers. Polukranos we can use to basically have a one-sided board wipe. Okay, so now with all of those things we've talked about, let's take a look at some of the things our deck can do and take a look at the stats for our deck. We're going to start out with card draw. Card draw is incredibly important, and we have 12 cards that are going to draw us more cards when they hit the battlefield or when they have some kind of effect in the battlefield. We have Selvala, Heart of the Wilds built in. Lifeblood Hydra, when it dies, draws us cards. Yavimaya Elder can draw us a card if we sack it, and it's going to get us lands. Grook's Pack Leader, depending on our creature size, is going to draw us cards. And then Kozilek will refill our hand if we have less than 7 when we cast it. And we also have some Planeswalkers that draw us cards. Nissa Vastwood Seer, +1, will either put a land directly onto the battlefield or put the non-land card into our hand. Nissa Vital Force, her ultimate, lets us draw a card every single time we put a land on the battlefield. Garruk's -3, we draw cards equal to the greatest power, which is oftentimes is going to be a huge amount of cards. And then Freyalise will let us draw cards depending on how many green creatures we control. We also have Nissa's Revelation, which lets us scry 5 and reveal the card. And if it's a creature card, which we're going to make sure it is, then we're going to draw cards equal to its power and gain life equals to its toughness. Sylvan Library gives us, more often than not, it gives us more selection than anything else. It lets us dig a little deeper and then select the card we want to draw. But if we see 2 cards or 3 cards that we want, we can just pay some life to keep all of them. And then Elemental Bond is basically Garruk's pack leader, but in enchantment form. Okay, next take a look at our tutors and general card advantage cards. We have 6 of those. Starting with Genesis Wave and Genesis Hydra, we've already talked about how we can use those to generate card advantage for us. But then we also have Natural Order, which lets us tutor up any green creature in our deck as long as we can sacrifice a green creature. Primal Command tutors any card to the top of our library, to our hand, any creature. Conduit of Ruin puts any colorless creature with converted mana cost 7 or greater onto the top of our library. And then Tooth and Nail lets us go get 2 creatures and either put them in our hand or onto the battlefield. Okay, ramp spells. We have 18 cards that are going to ramp us. We definitely want to ramp in this deck, and so we're going to have ample opportunities to do so. Starting off with our commander and the artifacts that allow us to untap and reuse her. That's going to ramp us pretty significantly. We also have Soul Ring, which is pretty standard. Emerald Medallion. Most of our cards are green, so it's going to ramp almost every card in our deck by 1. Sword of the Animus lets us go and get a basic land put on the battlefield, tapped whenever we attack. And then Extraplanar Lens, we've talked about that before as well. We also have these 3 Planeswalkers that ramp us in one way or another, whether it be through putting a Mana Dork onto the battlefield, putting a land onto the battlefield, or untapping a land to let us reuse it. We have Sakura Tribe Elder that lets us sacrifice it to go get a basic land card onto the battlefield. Kadamas Reach gets us 1 onto the battlefield and 1 into our hand. Conduit of Ruin ramps our first creature spell we cast each turn, makes it cost 2 generic less. And then Animus Awakening lets us go and get as many lands as we can pay X to go and get. And then finally our 4 lands that ramp us as well. We have 14 disruption cards in our deck. Let's take a look at those, starting with the most generic that will hit anything and work our way to the more specific. We have Ulamog, the Senseless Hunger, lets us exile any 2 permanents. It's also indestructible and mills the top 20 cards directly into exile whenever we attack an opponent. Song of the Dryads also is great removal. It turns anything into a forest with no other abilities. So if someone's casting a commander that's just giving you fits, turn it into a tree. Okay, next we have 4 cards that will deal with any non-creature permanent. Bramble Crash for 2 and 2 green destroys any non-creature permanent. Primal Command, one of its mode, allows us to take any non-creature permanent and put on top of its owner's library. So it's a temporary disruption, but that could be all we need. Terracodon lets it destroy up to 3 target non-creature permanents. Now they do get a 3/3 green elephant creature token for each thing we destroy, but I would much rather them have an elephant 3/3 elephant than a doubling season, say. And then finally, Woodfall Primus for 5 and 3 green will allow us to destroy any target non-creature permanent, and it has Persist. So if it dies, it comes back to the battlefield with a -1/-1 counter on it, and it will do it again. Okay, and then next we have 3 cards that will help us deal with specifically artifacts or enchantments. We talked about Corrosive Grip being an uncounterable version. Reclamation Sage, when it enters the battlefield, destroys an artifact or enchantment, and then Freyalise, her -2 will do the same thing. We also have some ways to deal with creatures. Ovenwall Tracker allows us to use our creatures as to fight other creatures to destroy them. Pelucranos, we've already talked about, and Silklash Spider as well, can be one-sided born wipes themselves. We have Ghost Quarter to get rid of problematic lands. And then we have these 4 cards that are not counted in the disruption cards in their 14 number, but they also disrupt, they're just not targeted disruption. We have, first of all, in the middle, Artisan of Kozilek and It That Betrays have Annihilator 2, so every time they attack, the defending player sacrifices 2 permanents. Kozilek will allow us to counter cards as we discard cards that have the same converted mana cost. And then Emrakul lets us Mindslaver and potentially wreck someone's board state when we cast it. Things are going to be going to the graveyard quite a bit in this deck because we're going to be creating so many big things. We want ways to get them back. We have 5 cards that we can recur cards. Eternal Witness is a standard, brings any card back to our hand. Nisselvato Force will return a permanent card from our graveyard to our hand. Green Warden Rasa, any card to our hand can do it twice. Praetor's Council we've already talked about, brings the entire graveyard back to your hand. And then Artisan Kozilek, when you cast it, you get to return a creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. So let's take a look at our conclusion here. Is Selvala Heart of the Wilds a viable mono green commander? Absolutely. Like I said earlier on, Omnath is one that people point to as the preeminent mono green commander. And yes, it's a great card. I need to have one for this deck, and eventually that will happen. But if you've never taken a look at this Selvala, I would urge you to please do so. She can generate crazy amounts of mana and do some pretty awesome things. So, Selvala, great card. Thanks a lot for tuning into this deck tech today. We hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please like and subscribe down below. Leave us a comment if you have any suggestions. I'll also include a link to the deck list on deckstats.net. And keep checking back in with us for more great Commander content. Again, I'm PDX Gamer. Have a great day and keep coming back. Take a look at Filthy Casuals EDH. Thanks, guys.